Katera Rising by J.D. Evergreen. Chapter 8. Injured rebels lay on mats or sit propped up against walls. Uninjured people do their best to provide medical attention, water, or comfort to those in need. There are hundreds of people in this large room. I had no idea the rebellion was so big. No idea so many people had managed to escape captivity and find a home with some measure of freedom. Lexa stands in the entryway and the whole room stops to look at her. I can see relief and joy in many faces. Lexa doesn't say a word. Slowly she raises her hand so her closed right fist rests on her chest over her heart. Everyone in the room repeats the action. Lexa nods and the people in the room resume their various tasks. I don't understand what I have just witnessed, and I am unsure if I am allowed to ask. Lexa takes in a slow breath, and I can see the effort it takes to hide the pain of her injuries. She moves to the nearest injured rebel and assists with bandaging a nasty arm wound. Many people approach her, and she continues her work as she speaks to each of them. It is easy to see how important Lexa is to them, and in return how important they are to her. I find myself enthralled by the respect and attention Lexa gives to each person. I watch her work for far too long. I look away and meet the eyes of an old woman who gives me a knowing smile, and my cheeks heat up. I should be helping. A small boy around 8 slides up to stand beside me and ghosts my movements as I approach a wall with a line of woven baskets set alongside it. I turn to face him. "What are you up to?" The boy's cheeks turn bright red and he splutters out,
"Can I help you?"
I raise my eyebrow. "That depends. Do you have a name?" The boy nods his head eagerly.
"My name's Louis."
I nod. "Nice to meet you, Louis. Do you think you can remember the things I show you?" Louis puffs his chest out with pride.
"I am very good at remembering what I have seen and heard. All the adults say so."
I smile at his bravado. "Well, Louis, let's see if we can help." With that, I flip the woven lid of the closest basket and find it filled with medical supplies. I take the hamper over to a man with a deep cut in his arm and settle down beside him as I start to clean his wound. Louis shadows my every movement and watches intently. I'm not as good at this as my mother would have been, but seasons of having my own wounds treated after arena matches has given me a basic knowledge of what needs to be done to make most people comfortable. I spend hours treating the wounded, and Louis learns quickly. So many people are severely injured from cave-ins or run-ins with the beast. Apparently the second beast found its way into a mess hall during mealtime. I shudder as my mind imagines the panic that must have taken place in that room. To help pass the time, I listen to the discussions taking place around me as I work and talk with my young companion. The description of this other creature, a brown chimera, gives me the impression it had been smaller than the one Lexa and I encountered. The others' accounts don't describe a beast with face appendages like the one we had fought, and I am unsure if they are the same species. A young man lies beside me, unconscious from the pain his injuries have caused him. Doing my best to be gentle, I wrap his mangled leg in a tight bandage and place a yellow cloth next to him. These cloths are left to tell the actual healers which people have injuries that need a person with more medical training than the average individual. "I need to go fill this, Louis," I tell the young boy. "You wait here with this young man and see that he gets help." Louis seems uncertain.
"Okay, I will wait here,"
he finally says. I rise and take my basket back to the wall so I can refill it with supplies. I squat by the pile of rough bandages and select some for the basket. A gentle tap on my shoulder startles me, and I twist around to stare up into emerald green eyes and a concerned face. Lexa gestures at my arm. "Has anyone tended your injuries?" I glance down at my arm and study the stain working its way through my bandage. "I should probably deal with that," I agree. I delay acting on my words because part of me fears more blue lines, but Lexa stands nearby waiting, and I know she won't go until my wounds have been checked. I reach for my bracer and fumble with the clasp. I can't remember it ever being this hard to remove. I'm about to give up when a gentle hand takes my arm. Lexa crouches before me. "Here, let me help." Carefully, she removes the bracer, doing her best not to aggravate the wound further as she unwraps the bandage. I scan my arm. The lines are gone. I rub my face with my hand and hold out my injured arm, waiting for Lexa to inspect it. Lexa cleans the area with a cloth.
You have pulled out 3 of your stitches.
She takes the med kit from me and rummages through it, pulling out a needle and sinew thread. Lexa looks at me. I nod and she sets about sealing my wound. I watch her push the needle through my skin, re-sealing my lacerations. She is efficient and quickly finishes the last stitch before wrapping my arm in a fresh bandage. Lexa props her head up with her hand and her ordinarily perfect posture is slumped. She could have left my injuries for a medic. Thank you, I say quietly. Lexa has small splashes of blood on her shirt. I'm not sure how much of it is hers. I make a mental note to attempt to check her injuries when we are in a place more private. I have a feeling Lexa won't reveal an injury to her people. Not when they need her to be strong, and especially when she believes her injuries are less severe than those she treats. I have a suspicion they are not. Tash enters the room, scans through the people scattered throughout it, and spots us. Her and a young man head in our direction. The young man's square glasses magnify his blue eyes until they are enormous, and they roam the room, taking in every detail. As they approach, his sandy hair flops around his face and the tangled mess desperately needs a brush. The pair approach us and the tall, lanky man looks over me. I can feel the sharp intelligence behind those eyes. A reddish-brown brand bubbles the skin under his eye, the numbers 3921. With it is the symbol of a spanner. He must be another escaped engineer. I cannot help but imagine the pain of a face brand. My brand hurt enough that I would even rank it in my top 10 most painful experiences. And my brand is on my thigh.
We have set up a room across the hall for people to sleep in.
Tash informs us.
The south wing of the rebel encampment is safe, and we have patrols watching all entrances.
She nods at us.
You two should get a few hours rest before you pass out on us. Lucas will show you to your bunks.
The tall, lanky man beside Tash waves at us with a shy smile. Lexa's jaw clenches and her eyes glint in frustration as she looks at everything around us that still needs to be done. I lean in, take the medical basket from her, and murmur, "You are no good to anyone if you are so exhausted you cannot raise your sword or think clearly." Lexa lets out a long sigh and nods, rising to her feet with grace. I try to get up behind her and fumble, exhaustion making my limbs heavy and uncooperative, but somehow I manage to rise to my feet. I smile up at the tall man beside me. "Lead the way, Lucas." Lucas returns the gesture and swipes his long hair out of his face as he turns to lead us through the wounded. I turn and wave goodbye to Louis, who stands and waves eagerly in return. We pass through the hall and enter another room. We pad our way through lines of bunks. Most are filled with sleeping people wrapped up in warm blankets. We reach the back of the room and find an empty bed, and a bulging knapsack rests upon it. The whole setup is behind a rough dirt wall. I assume this extra privilege is an attempt to give Lexa some privacy. Lexa's jaw clenches as she surveys the space, her voice strained.
Aren't there more beds behind here?
Lucas shifts on his feet.
Tash was trying to give you some space, and in any case, there are no more beds. These are all the emergency supplies and what we could scavenge from ruined sleeping areas. We never intended to deal with such a large-scale relocation. People must sleep in shifts.
Lexa walks around the space as if gauging how much room there is.
We must remedy this as soon as possible.
Lucas nods and quickly retreats. I survey the space and scan the various storage crates that fill it. If they had more beds, 2 or 3 would fit. Lexa moves behind the boxes and stoops to pick up an old cot, far older than the ones around the room, and begins to assemble it, twisting aged wood together. I awkwardly realize I still have the medical basket in my hands and set it on the floor near the wall. With my hands now free, I go over to help Lexa with her wooden puzzle. We have just finished stretching an old sack over the wooden poles when Nathaniel rounds the corner. He looks momentarily surprised to find his leader and me kneeling on the ground assembling a cot.
What is that?
Lexa sighs and rubs her temples.
It is a bed, Nathaniel.
Would sleep on that. It looks like it will collapse the moment anyone puts weight on it.
I look at the cot. It does seem a little rickety. I don't mind sleeping in it, I offer. It's better than the stone floor I usually sleep on.
She's going to sleep in here with you?
Nathaniel snaps.
We met her 4 days ago and you are willing to sleep in the same room as her? What if she's here to murder you?
4 days. Well, that answers how long I was in and out of consciousness for. Lexa rises to her feet and stares at Nathaniel.
I could have died in that cave-in. I was pinned to the wall and had no hope of getting myself free. Claire could have let me die then.
Lexa pauses and adds,
I even told her to run, and yet she stayed to free me, risking her life to save mine.
Nathaniel opens and closes his mouth, unsure of what to say. Eventually he settles on silence. Lexa levels him with a stare.
I trust her. Now, did you come here to scold me, or are you here for a reason?
Nathaniel looks down at his feet and clears his throat.
I will have water and food sent to you.
With that, he turns and leaves. Lexa rubs her face and sits down on the cot we just assembled. It creaks alarmingly but holds. I gingerly sit down next to her, causing the bed to groan further. Is he always like that?
Nathaniel is just overprotective.
Lexa says through her hands. She rubs her temples and I spot faded green lines on her neck. Do you have a headache?
Yes, I have had it since the cave-in.
My next question dies on my lips as I turn to see a group of young children holding a large pot of water. I nudge Lexa, and she looks up from her hands and smiles at the children who swarm her. A small boy tugs Lexa's sleeve.
Lexa, did you kill the monster in the tunnels? Was it big?
Chirps another boy. An older girl hushes the children before caving, asking,
Are we safe now?
Lexa holds up her hands and waits for the children to quieten.
Yes, we are safe.
The children all start to speak at once, but before they can ask too many questions, a plump older woman rounds the corner with a blanket in her hands.
All right, children, off to bed. Leave them be.
The woman instructs. Lexa kneels to the ground and the children rush her for a hug. The smallest girl with blonde hair manages to circle back and claims a second hug before the older woman ushers her off.
Here you go, dearie,
says the older woman as she hands me the blanket in her arms.
I was told you didn't have one.
I take the blanket from her. Thank you. The old woman nods and leaves. Lexa stands up and I unroll my blanket and lay it out on the bed. I strip off my armor, the blood and dirt covering it make for an unappealing image, and I smile ruefully at the memory of being clean after my first hot bath. Unfortunately, that didn't last as long as I would have liked. I turn to find Lexa removing her shirt and attempting to put on a clean one. There is a deep swollen gash on her shoulder, and the skin around it is already showing blue and purple blotches. You are hurt, I say.
I know.
Comes a quiet reply. Let me help you. Alexa stands in front of me wearing only a chest binding and pants. She nods ever so slightly. I have to force myself to swallow as I turn to find items to treat her with. I take a deep breath and collect the water bowl and the medical kit. I go over to her and begin cleaning the dirt from her wound. I remove tiny bits of rock from the injury, carefully working them out with the clean cloth. My mind flashes to a falling rock and Lexa's gasp of pain. My stomach twists and my eyes close as I force the memory away. That rock should have hit me. I let out a slow breath and make an attempt at conversation. You're an excellent fighter. Lexa takes in a sharp breath as I work a small, stubborn stone out of her injury.
Thank you. You are not so bad yourself.
She looks back at me, a smile on her face. I shrug with a smile. What can I say? I'm great. Lexa lets out a small laugh and shakes her head at my words. I retrieve the needle and thread and use them to close the wound on Lexa's shoulder. Returning to my backpack, I collect my stolen healing paste and smear a generous amount of it on her injury. As I do so, I notice the green lines on her neck have faded completely. I busy myself with wrapping a bandage around her shoulder and chest in an attempt to keep the clean covering in place. We use what remains of the water and do our best to wipe ourselves clean. I collect my armor from the pile on the floor and drape it over a crate so it is out of the way. I rummage through my backpack, but the only clothes I have to change into is my old singlet and grey shorts, which are about as worn as clothing can be, and holes have started to work their way into the seams. I pull the shirt to get a better look at the new gap on the side. The material rips and falls apart in my hands. I sigh and hold the sizable chunk of material in my hand. My stomach is now entirely exposed. Why do I even bother wearing this? It's not like it's doing much anyway. Lexa lets out a chuckle at my predicament and throws me a shirt from her backpack. I quickly swap my old one for this new one. I hold the tattered parts of my old singlet in my hands, unsure of what to do with it. I look at it for a moment and stuff it into my bag. That's a later problem. I look up to find Lexa fingering her necklace through her shirt as she stares at the wall. I want to talk to Lexa about our necklaces, to tell her about my quest, and to ask her about the painful light on my skin and the headache. But now is not the time. We are both tired, and in this quiet room it would be too easy to be overheard. I stand and gaze at the room lined with cots and all the displaced rebels. Were those chimeras here looking for me? It wouldn't be the first time Emperor Darkmoor has employed the use of beasts to find a wayward slave. It's too soon since the Cerebi to dismiss the possibility. Surely he doesn't hunt down every slave in this manner, or this rebel base wouldn't be so full of people. It could be because I am such a well-known slave, but a rumor could be spread that I died from my injuries. My thoughts drift back to Catherine's words regarding my mother's lineage. My thoughts collide and tumble over one another, trying to make desperate and confusing links. I'm too tired for this type of thinking. I return to my cot and shove my bag and boots under it. I cast one last look at Lexa before I crawl under the covers. I roll around, the bed creaking as I search for a comfortable position. Finally, after much tossing and turning, I find a warm spot and bury my head in the blanket. That's it for Chapter 8, Marked by Fate. If you've been enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In this chapter, we got to see more of the rebels, both their strength and their struggles. Claire stepped into a new role, helping where she could, while Lexa continued to push herself beyond exhaustion. And those chimeras? Were they just a coincidence, or was someone sending them? What do you think? Was the attack just bad luck, or is something darker at play? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in Chapter 9.